The elusive next project by Blizzard is often a subject discussed intently by the video game world. As a leading architect in creative video game development, Blizzard seems to operate in its own little planet, playing by its own rules and moving to the beat of its own music. They release games only when they're ready, making their titles synonymous with a certain degree of tight polish, rarely seen from the common developer. And with the funding of the 5th largest publisher on the globe, they can afford to turn as many of their imaginations into digital realities. They stand out from the pack, often being considered one of gaming's greatest companies. While you might not love Diablo or Warcraft 3, it's not hard to see why many do. There's a word for it. It's called the Blizzard charm, as many people say, something that any game made by them can make you feel. It's the quality, perhaps, or how addictive they are and enjoyable they are, and the painstaking attention to detail, the great presentations, or the value we obtain from them. Those are but a few things that people love about Blizzard. With only a handful of games to their name, they take their time, ignoring the endless cries that rally them to make the next big MMO follow-up to World of Warcraft. And they almost did, in the form of a secretive collection of released screenshots, interviews, and ideas and tidbits called Titan. I was sitting in the crowd at BlizzCon that day Overwatch was announced, which sent Titan to basically an early grave. After 7 years of development hell, Blizzard pulled the plug on what would be the next evolution of the massively multiplayer online role-playing game. But not all was lost, however. Assets were reused for a hero shooter, which became Blizzard's next video game, Overwatch. The failure of Titan was instead a realization that the post-World of Warcraft era would take the industry to a far different place, where time-sinking, overbearing, enormous MMOs were not the future. Fueled by the sudden popularity of streaming and competitive esports, their foresight did prove to be correct. Today we're going to look at the untold story of Overwatch, beyond Titan and into a land of competitive esports, high-stakes business, and the birth of one of gaming's most iconic shooting games, Overwatch. Overwatch was built from the wreckage of Blizzard's attempt to make a new MMORPG codenamed Titan, but the tale of Overwatch begins far more back into time than this game. It begins with a little gem called World of Warcraft. When WoW was released back into the world in 2004, we might as well have been living on another planet. 14 years ago was the age of the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox One, don't you forget. It was the Renaissance period of PC and 64-bit gaming. Strategy games were popular, as was the adventure genre, linear games, and specialty titles like Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow. We're talking about a time of Half-Life 2, Counter-Strike Source, Doom 3, Battlefield Vietnam, and the original Star Wars Battlefront. Yes, the original one. Just stop and think about how far we have come since those days. There was no esports scene back then. Twitch and YouTube had not been invented yet, so it was a completely different era. It was all about the $60 box video game. But the subscription model of World of Warcraft transformed this $60 buy it, own it video game into a system of recurring monthly income for developers. It was a big change. With it, they can extend the lifetime of their games, once thought to be the job of the now long-lost expansion pack era. But the journey to make this kind of game was not easy. The development of an ongoing, sprawling, and growing MMO is a daunting proposition, full of large-scale investment and emotional and financial strain on a development studio. Deadlines are always lingering, new content is a never-ending requirement, and the sustainability of the game requires an entire organization to control. These reasons often go underappreciated by the gaming industry, only strengthening the notion that when done right, a successful MMO is a rare and outstanding achievement. But by their next game, Hearthstone, they pursued a change, to take their exhaustive video game development process and boil it down to a simple and centralized experience, essentially to create a small-scale video game in a free-to-play market. Hearthstone's immediate success reminded the company that a self-contained, smaller video game could be as lucrative as a colossal MMO. Hearthstone arrived on the scene during this really weird time when games were still trying to figure out the best way to be free yet profitable. For years, games had stumbled to find the answer. How much do I charge? How do I design a system that is fair yet also sustainable? The mobile gaming revolution was also in full effect, pulling gamers away from their stationary computers and consoles at an alarming rate. Gamers across the globe were tuning into esports at a rate unchallenged by other media forms. Some of them would end up watching more video games than playing them every day. As a result, they had less time to play games, creating a rise in popularity of niche games that were easy and quick to get into. So Blizzard ended up cashing in on Hearthstone as they developed a small, concentrated video game that was esports friendly, streaming friendly, and most importantly, friendly to the behaviors of this new age of gamers. In the words of Jeff Kaplan, it is okay to have a smaller, self-contained game. After the WoW fallout and the explosion of this mobile and free-to-play boom, the era of large video games priced at $60 was now coming to a close, or at least becoming the awkward minority at the party. And following the popularization of the living video game model and the loot box micro-gambling craze, the solution for Blizzard's next big game was to learn from the lessons they obtained from World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, and now the defunct Titan. So in secret, they saw where the industry's most profitable avenue was heading. A centralized, easy to get into, competitive esports friendly game was to be pursued by Blizzard and many of its competitors. Overwatch is a hero shooter set into the future where 12 players battle it out in objective-based game modes. At the end of 2017, 35 million players had signed up to fight in 6-on-6 gameplay. The idea with Overwatch was to ditch the old-fashioned way of making a daunting, life-altering Blizzard game that sucked away years of your soul. Instead, we pick a goofy character and shoot guns. That is a huge departure for Blizzard, yet exactly in line with where the industry is going. With new generations of gamers piling into the scene every day, Overwatch needed to be an accessible yet challenging and easy to get into game. A game where you could jump in, have some fun immediately, and then leave, a formula Hearthstone helped gravitate Blizzard towards. Overwatch's game design is very simple yet complex at the same time, and this is why it is so popular. Usually video games are divided into two groups. You've got the low barrier of entry but low skill ceiling Call of Duty games, and the high barrier of entry but very high skill ceiling games like Rainbow Six Siege and PUBG. You can see the problems associated with both. Neither of them make it easy for every type of gamer to enjoy the game. On the other hand, Overwatch successfully maintains a low barrier of entry yet retains a very high skill ceiling when it comes to mastering the characters. The beauty of blending both is that a larger audience can be obtained, as Overwatch is easy to get into and of course hard to master. Perfect for a game with casual and ranked modes, as both cater to different groups. And when you add in that the game is based around characters and not just the weapon, you have even more opportunity to make a connection to any given player. You might not personally like it, but the growing demand for Overwatch is something no one can deny, and with free monthly content and events, Overwatch will last for at least a few more years. This newfound perspective is most certainly aimed directly at the tribulations and lessons learned from World of Warcraft and Hearthstone. Overwatch didn't need to be a game that lasted 15 years, or a game that had a $750 million budget. The industry is steering towards a more contained gameplay experience, and more specialty products like Fortnite and PUBG, small scope games that do one or two things incredibly well and encourage esports and streaming. Hearthstone is in that bucket too. And with the rising costs of video game development and the difficulty of creating new content, Overwatch smartly funds its post-development practices with cosmetic-only loot boxes. In contrast to AAA games today, Overwatch releases content such as maps, heroes, and game modes completely free of charge, the cost being covered by those microtransactions. Some lamented the implementation, but fears were crushed, however, after players happily bought loot boxes in abundance, making Overwatch's micro-gambling system a million-dollar digital industry. Overwatch was born from this idea that we need to scale back classic video game development and specialize to appease a new age of gamers, their need for instant satisfaction, and the rising popularity of competitive esports. It has survived the onslaught of major competition when hero-based shooters were saturating the market. Lawbreakers, Battleborn, and Paladins, they just could not stand up against Overwatch. Team Fortress 2, on the other hand, survived barely. Love it or hate it, Overwatch built a legacy upon the back of lessons learned from Blizzard's most iconic games and is perfectly at home in today's evolving video game market. Thanks for watching, guys, I really appreciate it. Let me know what your thoughts are regarding Overwatch down below in the comment section, and have a great day. We'll see you guys in our next video.